Thank you. Not in the US, now in Montpellier, France, as of the end of this month. So thank you. I'm going to change subjects slightly to talk a little bit about what we've already learned throughout most of this conference about the complex research challenges ahead of us. And we've learned from the last three speakers about some of the detail in that science and the great investment that has gone forward that was invested some 10, 15 years ago and today are paying fruits. And that is one of the key points that I'd like to raise, is that research in this area is a long-term investment, and we need to always be mindful of that. What we face today is a complex situation. Increasing demand through population and economic growth, urbanization, changing diets, changing landscapes. We have the increasing challenges of climate change, energy and food crisis, and now increasingly political instability. But many are being left behind. Many are being isolated, many isolated not only in volume, but isolated nutritionally. And this is a global challenge, not just about the developing world. It faces all of us. Globally, we must invest today in long-term and sustained agricultural research to prevent food crisis of the future, and as a consequence, political and economic instability in 2020 and beyond. We cannot solve food, nutrition, and health challenges without also managing fragile ecosystems, including forest areas, and more sustainable use of natural resources. So these challenges are highly complex. And the challenge and complexity of sustainable nutrition security for health requires us to use all the tools at our disposal. First of all, as you've heard, we need to increase the volume through a more rapid rate of productivity gains. This is not only good for populations, but also good for the environment, providing more for every unit of resource consumed, including energy, land, and water, and reducing pressure on more marginal areas. To do this, we need to have all the tools at our disposal, tools of science innovation to double crop production on existing arable land, including in remote areas, using traditional knowledge and breeding, IPM, modern and organic farming methodologies, crop rotations, molecular tools, biotechnology, agroforestry, and many, many other tools at our disposal. Through these productivity gains, for example, the CGIAR's new research program for rice, GRISP, led by member center IRI, along with Africa Rice and CIAT, aims to raise 150 million out of poverty by 2035. But solving health and nutritional issues is not just about volume and quantity of food. It's also about quality. We've learned a lot about that today. New innovations allow reduction in fungal disease with less mycotoxins. Wise use of IPM allows reduced use of pesticides. New technologies allow improved nutritional quality, digestibility, and bioavailability. And new crop research allows improved and increased crop and diet diversity. Other tools include biofortification that we've learned about already from Howard, and a more diverse range of vegetable crops for vitamin A and zinc and iron availability, for example. And we can also improve protein sources through improvements in livestock, improvements in fish, and also in pulses. Enhance vitamin and essential element sources, improve value chains, and availability amongst the rural and urban poor. And importantly, we also need to reduce losses. Not only the losses prior to harvest, but also losses after harvest, and even post-consumption through access to clean water to reduce diarrheal diseases. But to provide these solutions, we must access the best knowledge and technologies available, both in the public sector, the private sector, from academic sources and civil society. And access to these innovations provides lasting and sustainable solutions, and that requires a radical and urgent partnership revolution. We heard a lot about the green revolution. I really believe that we need to take it to the next scale and really to talk about a partnership revolution. We need to cross sector boundaries, and we need to work rapidly at scale. It requires the private sector to embrace solving the challenges of the poor. It requires public institutions to embrace private enterprise. And it requires long-term commitments to research that doesn't stay in the labs, but is rapidly disseminated and adapted with and by farmers and their households, mostly headed up by women. Partnerships are critical to secure and deliver new innovation for public good, particularly in crops and diseases or areas that are currently underserved by the private sector. And whether we're talking about more nutritious varieties of sweet potato or healthier grains, research should not be confined to the lab. It includes research at the farmer level, with farmers, by farmers, for farmer households, and most of them women. It also includes research on markets, trade barriers, and value chains. So many of our centers are working on those fronts. And in order for science and technology innovation to improve livelihoods and health of the poor and the most vulnerable, clear recognition in research must be given that the rural household is really the nexus of agriculture, health, nutrition, sanitation, and education. And that's an important factor as we put together our research programs. But agricultural research investment pays off. Our CGIAR scientists work closely with hundreds of partners, including farmer groups, national extension and research, local and international private sector companies, civil society groups, and academic research institutions to find the very best solutions. We look for holistic and lasting solutions at the household and village level. When we look at the public investment in international agricultural research through the CGIAR, world production would be, without that, world production would be 4 to 5% lower. Developing countries would produce 7 to 8% less food. World food and grain prices would be 18 to 21% higher. And 13 to 15 million more children would be malnourished. For every dollar invested in CGIAR research, $9 worth of additional food is produced in developing countries, where it is needed the most. The evidence is clear. Agricultural growth alleviates poverty and hunger. So what are some of the barriers of this partnership revolution for agriculture and health and nutrition? And there's been a lot of work that's been carried out by the CGIAR centers, mostly by IFPRI, but many others as well. And I'm not going to go into all the details. But from personal experience, I'd like to highlight a few of those areas. The first being an apathy and lack of urgency. A sense that it is really someone else's problem and that the other sector or the other institution or the other country will solve that problem. Poverty and malnutrition are no longer just their problem, they are ours. Wheat harvests or deforestation in one region, one country, can and do have an impact that can be felt on the other side of the planet. And we need to be increasingly aware of that. We must get past the sector divide and mistrust. We must reach across the divide between agriculture, health, and nutrition. We must reach across the divide between public and private sectors, between institutions, and we must get past the silo mentality. Apathy also shows itself as the sense that the status quo is acceptable and that somehow the problem will go away. That grain yields in Africa, 1/6 of the rest of the world, are acceptable. That 1 billion people and growing are undernourished and go to bed hungry is somehow acceptable. And we must get past this phase of analysis paralysis, as I call it, always looking for the perfect solution and perhaps never finding it in this rapidly changing environment. By the time we find a solution, the problem has already changed. There's also a lack of willingness to try and a lack of funding to try new things that might fail. Our funding systems are bogged down in the search for the perfect. We must secure funding for adaptation and real-world solutions that allow scientists and the farmer households that they serve to learn as they go. To be willing to fail if by failing and less than perfect solutions we learn. We also need to incentivize dreaming. We need to fund and provide adequate resources for funding some blue sky thinking. to solve these challenging problems ahead of us. And it's also about lack of long-term commitments and accountability. We need to get beyond the project mentality and election cycles. Research success demands long-term commitment to achieve a full pipeline with room and time to filter out imperfections. We must get beyond funding of pet projects and knee-jerk responses to crisis. We need to prioritize our research very carefully, and we intend to do so. So very quickly on potential solutions, and there is many to this. Firstly, of course, we need to commit to long-term investment to support agriculture research. We also need to examine areas like orphan drugs legislation that happened in the States and created a whole industry of new solutions to diseases that were being left behind in the mainstream. That can also happen in agriculture and in that connection between agriculture and health. It creates policy incentives for long-term agricultural, nutrition, and health research partnerships. We can also examine combined extension models at the village level, such as rural development nodes that include para-health, para-agronomist, and para-sanitation workers all working together at one village development node. So with that, I would like to leave you with those thoughts at that time. Thank you.